Okay, I think I'm on. I think I am on. I'm assuming that I am on. Ooh, let me get behind here. I hate standing behind stuff. I'm like Deacon David. When I preach, I get out in front of people because I don't like to be stuck behind stuff, but um, we will do that so I can get my computer. All right, how we doing? We got everybody? Who's not here? Say aye. Oh man, you guys are really slow this morning. Do you need a dad joke or something? I preached at a funeral this weekend. A really good friend of mine, and he was a carpenter. And I told the altar servers I promised to do a dad joke at the end, and so I said me and the carpenter were his name was Kurt. Kurt, we're having a conversation, and I said, have you ever built stairs? And he says, yes, I've built stairs. And I said, well, what's your secret to building stairs? And Kurt said that, well, you always want to focus on what you're doing, and then always think one step ahead. So anyway, this talk today is one that I've been doing for I don't know how long, and I don't know how I got roped into doing it. I think it was like a default, and somebody said, hey, Bob, will you put something together for this before I was a deacon? And I said, sure, maybe, okay. And then once you get hooked into something, it's hard to get back out of it. I am at Holy Family Seymour in Tennessee now, about a 270 family parish compared to what we have here at All Saints. I do miss it, but it just got too confusing with me and Father Doug on the altar at the same time, people not knowing if I was Father Doug, and you would not believe how many people wanted to tell me their sins, and which is fine. I'll listen all day, but I can't do anything about it. So, life and dignity of the human person, and we're going to cover some of the hot button issues. And I don't know. I'm just going to say this very reverently right now that a lot of this stuff has affected me, and you can think of those issues: abortion, suicide, euthanasia. My life has been impacted by a lot of these, so if I get emotional through some of it, it's because I have personally felt some of this stuff. And you may have too. And so again, very reverently, I want to say these are tough subjects sometimes very tough subjects. But we're going to talk about some ways to get through a lot of this. Very interesting picture here, right? That's the hand of God thing, and if you expand this picture out, you can see that God has his arm wrapped around somebody, and we believe that somebody to be Mary. And it's kind of cool. And the other thing that you notice on this picture is notice Adam's fingers compared to God's. Adam is just kind of not really pointing to God, but God is strongly pointing to him. And that's us sometimes, that we are not always all in. And so we'll talk about some of that stuff. So what are our goals today? We want to think with the mind of the church. I will tell you right now that I have read this from cover to cover. The reason that I am probably a deacon today is because of Deacon Bob Hunt. He was in class with me as deacon class. He is Bob the Lesser. I am Bob the Greater. And I don't know how that happened, but it did happen because he is way greater than I. But my wife came home from one of these classes that he taught and said, she took this book and threw it down in front of me and said, "You're not doing your job." And I'm like, what? And she said, "You are supposed to be the spiritual leader of this family. You're a lifelong Catholic. I'm a convert. Deacon Bob said that if you don't know this book as a spiritual leader, you are not doing your job. Did everyone get a copy of the Catechism of the Catholic Church?" I can honestly tell you that I went through it in 2 weeks, cover to cover, and I could not find a single thing that I disagreed with. I may have had some thoughts about, okay, maybe I need to look at this further, but the Catholic Church with 2,000 years of history, I had to think that I can't be holier than that, and that there must be something to all this stuff. So I ask you to at least if you have not accepted all this stuff that you've had so far, and you will have, to at least keep an open mind that maybe I am wrong and the church is right. And that's why when I say think with the mind of the church, that's what I want to do. I want to talk about human nature, because if we're going to talk about human dignity, we need to know what it means to be a human. And what does the Catholic Church talk about when it uses the word human? And St. John Paul II used to call this an adequate anthropology. Anthropology being the study of man, and we have to have an adequate anthropology to have any of this make sense, particularly with all of the different terminology we see for the multiple genders, if you will. And again, I get it, people's feelings have a lot to do with stuff, but we have to at least start with what an adequate anthropology is. And we want to know why the church teaches what it teaches, not just what it teaches, but why. And that's sometimes the toughest question. I preached 2 funerals this weekend, and one of them, the big question that the wife had about her husband passing away after beating colon cancer, and then several years later fighting lung cancer for 3 years. She just wanted to know why. This is my cousin, wanted to know why. I can't give you an adequate explanation for the why. I just can't give you, I can give you the theological, but I can't give you an adequate explanation that is going to make you be satisfied. But I do know that God has a plan, and sometimes that's just not enough. You'll get there over time, but we want to know why the church teaches what it does teach. I want to understand the prophetic vocation of women. Anybody have that in mind? What do you think the prophetic vocation of women is? Thinking of the first woman. Any idea? All right, we'll get to that answer. It comes out of Genesis. We want to discuss, as I said, some of the hot button issues and the moral and social issues that we have. And then lastly, I want to give you some resources for you to go look stuff up, because I can't give you everything in this course, which would normally take, I think in deacon class we did it for 3 weekends straight, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for 3 months, and we didn't even come close to covering it all. Okay? First thing we need to talk about, because this is probably one of the most important things in all of this, is your conscience. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions or comments. But anyway, want to think about conscience, and this is Thomas Aquinas, one of the most quoted saints in here. He wrote the Summa Theologica. Anybody ever read the Summa Theologica? About that, if you have, I would be really amazed. But it's one of the preeminent books in the Catholic Church. But we want to think about what he says about conscience. In Catechism of the Catholic Church, Part 3, Section 1, Chapter 1, Article 6, we see what it means to have a conscience and what we are to do with that. Man has the right to act in conscience and in freedom, so as personally to make moral decisions. You get that? We have to follow our conscience, and that's coming straight out of the Catholic Church. Straight out of the Catholic Church. An individual must not be forced to act contrary to your conscience, nor must he be prevented from acting according to that conscience. Let that sink in. The Catholic Church is telling you that your conscience is important. But with that comes responsibility. Now, that also means that even in religious matters, and not just, it's especially in religious matters. Okay? But with that comes great responsibility, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to form our conscience and to continue to form our conscience. Just a simple thing, my conscience might tell me that I don't have to go to Mass every Sunday. I don't have to keep those days holy. I can do this at home. But the Catholic Church, you've been taught, hopefully I think at this point, that if we do that, that constitutes or may constitute a mortal sin. And so now that you know that, your conscience has to start telling me, okay, why is the church telling me this? Why is the church telling me this? All right. Any comments on conscience? Kind of get it? Yeah, follow your conscience. It's important. But Be well formed. All right, freedom and free will. What is freedom? Anybody? What is freedom? The ability to do whatever you want? Okay, that gets us in a lot of trouble, doesn't it? The ability to do whatever we want. St. John Paul II said, I think it was in Baltimore, when he had an audience in Baltimore, he said that freedom is the ability to do not what you want, but what you ought to do. That changes it a little bit, right? Changes you. That takes it from me to community, because we do live in community. God gave us free will. God gave us free will. I like to think of it like this. You know, he told us not to eat from the tree of good and evil. I like to think of it as several rooms. God said, you can go in this room, you can go in this room, you can go in this room, but you can't go in this room. But here's the key. I'm going to give you the key to this room, but you can't go in there. What is our natural tendency going to be? It's going to be to go in that room, right? It's going to be to go in that room. Everything we do, have Deacon Tim given you the talk on Trinity? Yeah, normally I don't think at this point that he has, because normally I do this talk back in early December, but I had some other commitments. But everything is about relationship. Our salvation as Catholics is not me and you, Jesus. Our salvation as Catholics, in a big word, corporeal. Our salvation is corporeal. And we hear from St. Paul, right? We are not all hands, we are not all eyes, we are not all ears. We are part of the body of Christ. And if we are part of the body of Christ, what we do within that body of Christ matters. Another book that you may not have read a lot of is the book of Tobit from the Old Testament. And if you could sum up the book of Tobit in a short sentence, it's all our actions matter in the sense of our eternal salvation and the salvation of others. What we do matters. We matter, and what we do matters. We do nothing that does not matter in some way, shape, or form. If I'm stuck in my room and I'm doing something in my room and I'm nobody around me, the fact that I'm stuck in my room where I could be someplace else doing something else, that matters. That has an effect. Okay? So we talk, Deacon Tim talks beautifully about Trinity, but we got to remember, because this is a huge part of the why, is it's all about relationship. Think about your relationships. It is not you and another person, ever. There's a reason you got together with somebody else. It may be a love for UT football, but that's that third thing that binds you in that relationship. Maybe your hate for UT football. Maybe I don't care about UT football. That's kind of where I am. But that third thing is what binds us. And the third thing is important, because if UT football goes away, the relationship has a tendency to fall about for those who base their relationship on UT football. If one person no longer likes UT football, that relationship changes or goes away unless you find some other third to bind. And what's the only third that never goes away? It's the only third that never goes away. The only binding force that never goes away. It's God. If your relationship as a husband and wife is first based on God, then your relationship will never go away. I would tell my kids, if you don't find somebody that loves God more than you do, go find somebody else. That's how important that is. Because if the two of you are focused on God in your relationship, then that relationship will stay strong. Make sense? All right. Let's talk about dignity. What time do we usually break, by the way? What's that? 10:15. Okay. I don't know. We'll see where we get here. All right. So what is dignity? Before we get to what is a human, the dignity is the right of a person to be valued or respected. When I talk about it, a lot of this stuff, I want to try to, as much as possible, avoid religious explanations, because a lot of times religious explanations fall on deaf ears because you're not talking to somebody that has a religious background or even cares about it these days. Although that plays a very important part of it, we want to try to put this in terms of just being a human being. What does that mean and what does that look like? And we talked a little bit about an adequate anthropology, or what is a human. We've titled this talk with the word life in it. We'll discuss what it means to be a human. What is life? How do you define life? And then all that together, as I said, not out of the Bible, but out of Thomas Jefferson's words, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights that can't be taken away, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe the original word is happenstance, which is the chance to be happy. We all have a right to at least have that chance to be happy. And so many governments take that right away by telling us what to do. And it's important in some aspect they do that, but anyway. All right. So what makes us equal? What makes us equal? I'm going to get to that, but let's go through some of these pictures here, and let's discuss first what is human. Man lying on his deathbed, hooked up to all kinds of machines and tubes and stuff. A human? Fully human? Fully human. Absolutely. Fully human. Anybody familiar with the Christian Newsom murders in Tennessee? Raise your hand if you are. Anybody have a personal connection to that? The father, you do?
My dad was friends with his dad.
Oh, excellent. And he converted as a result of that, where he could have gone the opposite direction. You want to tell us about that real quick? Do you have any comment?
I don't know a whole lot.
Yeah. Very humble man. Very humble man. But the father of one of them, I can't remember which one. Was it Shannon or?
No, Chris.
Okay. Converted to Christianity as a result of all this, because that's where he found the answer. When we don't know the answer, God has the answer. He may not tell it to us, but that's our only hope. And we'll talk a little bit about, in a bit, about the greatest disease right now, particularly among 10 to 14-year-olds, but it's very pervasive all the way up to 35 years of age and beyond. Okay, so here comes a picture that Susan and I are familiar with because we used to do prison ministry together. Anybody know this individual? He is the last person to be convicted in those murders. And I believe he's spending time in Alabama right now. But Susan and I used to minister to this gentleman. And I say that with dignity because he deserves it. We ministered to this individual in prison before we even knew that that's what he was in for. I used to go through the list of the prisoners before we went in and go through the inmate population to see what they were in for. I didn't know what specifics were involved with him being in prison, only that he committed murder or was assistant in committing murder. And so we would minister to people like this, to pedophiles, to you name it. And we would have them come into prison. And I will tell you that if I knew nothing else about this individual, that he looked forward to coming to be with us. He knew Scripture. He was doing Bible studies, leading Bible studies in prison. And this goes to the question about the death penalty and why the Catholic Church doesn't believe in the death penalty, because it's not up to us, it's not our life. But we'll talk about things like that. Anybody here think they can go into prison and have a conversation with somebody if you knew exactly why they were there and what they were doing? Tough. I'm telling you, that is hard. That is hard. But I got more from this man than I guarantee you he got from me. Okay? So, really tough, but human. Deserves to be treated with dignity. Down syndrome baby. Human? Absolutely. And there are places in the world where it's okay to abort them if you know that they have Down syndrome. Anybody deal with Down syndrome or have one or know someone? Or they're some of the most beautiful people that you will ever meet. The most loving. I love hugs. I was telling Kathy back there that I love hugs, and I tell my parishioners that I love hugs. I said, but I will not hug you unless you come to me like this, because I can get in trouble for hugging somebody that doesn't want to hug. And there's a deacon in our diocese that was out to breakfast with his family, and his young granddaughter was there, and he had his collar on, and the granddaughter came over and sat in his lap, and the people at the table next door called the police on him for abuse. And he had to be taken out of ministry for some time until it can be investigated and proven. That's the society that we live in. Touch is so important. That's why I like to hug people, because touch is so important. There's stories, and you may have heard them, from Ireland in the orphanages where the young babies in cradles were dying at a very high rate until somebody said maybe they need human touch. So they started picking up these babies and having skin-to-skin contact with these babies at specific times during the day. The death rate, mortality rate just plummeted completely. We need touch. Social media is good, but if we don't have that face-to-face interaction, and I think you guys are seeing that particularly as young adults, that social interaction is important. Getting together, getting involved in young adult groups. That's important. That's important. We have to have that physical contact or we die. Human, yep. We got a good friend from high school that has a Down syndrome baby. He's nonverbal. But is anybody an Eagle Scout in here? Anybody did scouting? I lasted 3 weeks in Cub Scouts because it just was killing me, and I got to build a little race car thing, and then I was done. But my friend's son, 30 years old, 25, 30 years old, he got his Eagle Scout. At like 22 years old, he got an exemption to allow him to go. He ended up being able to build the fire that you have to build from scratch by himself. I mean, it's so sweet. It's just beautiful. This kid will hug you forever. But can't speak a word. Yeah, human. Absolutely. Baby, just out of the womb. Human? Absolutely. How about in the womb? Human? If it's human out, it's human in. How about there? In a test tube. Human? Anybody have in vitro fertilization in their life? Yeah. There was a young lady a couple years ago, that had that situation. And absolutely human. Absolutely human. The way we go about getting it may not be right, may not be in God's plan of a man and a woman coming together. But the bottom line from the Catholic Church perspective is nobody has a right to a biological child. It's beautiful when it happens. But to take a child through adoption, my grandmother was adopted at 14 years old, and nobody knew it until after she died. Boy, that explained a heck of a lot of my biological DNA analysis. Where the heck did this DNA come from? But it was beautiful to know that a 14-year-old got adopted. And she was bullied for it. And she didn't care. That was my grandmother. She just knew she had parents that loved her enough at that age to adopt her. So yes, human. All of these, all the way down to the beginning, I've got a new grandchild on the way that is, funny story. I got a 3.5-year-old granddaughter that spent the night with us last night, and her mom is now pregnant, 9 weeks pregnant, with our fourth grandbaby, and she had a picture of the ultrasound on her phone and showed it to the 3.5-year-old granddaughter, and out of the mouths of babes, it's a black and white picture, right? She said, "Oh," said, "my baby sister is black." And oh, the husband said, "It better not be." But I just thought that was so cute, the innocence that can see that that's a baby in there. Fully human, absolutely fully human, all the way down to this level. The minute the sperm and the egg come together and creates that first split of the cell, everything is there to be a human. Full DNA is there. The whole structure is there. People try to put, well, let's say, well, when the heartbeat, then it's human. Well, when it's born, it's human. When it can live on its own, it's human. I had kids. I raised kids, and some of you your parents may tell you, a 16-year-old, you couldn't live on your own. You still needed us. We need somebody. So to live on your own, those are random times. But scientifically, if you were to pull DNA out of those two cells, pull DNA out of any one of us, and compare to see what's there, everything's there. So if everything's there, nothing gets added. An arm doesn't. The DNA for an arm doesn't get added later. The DNA for a leg doesn't get added. Everything is there. So the only thing that scientifically makes sense is that yes, that is a human right then and there. Make sense? Hard to, it's a hard thing. It's one of those things that our conscious is just sometimes can't grasp or don't want to grasp just yet. But scientifically, that's the only place it makes sense to start calling that a human. Only place. Does not matter how that human was formed. Doesn't matter what the relationship was, how it was, because that is a separate human individual that deserves dignity. And I understand the rape. I understand the incest. I understand all of those things. And it's saddening and it's tough. And I have somebody in my life that has gone through that. And I have didn't find out about it until after I was married to this individual. And I no longer am, do have an annulment, but I didn't find out until after I was married that she was forced to abort her child by her parents when she was 15. I have a daughter in heaven. I asked her, did you name the child? And she said, without even hesitating, her name was Jenna. And I said, oh, wow. When you get to heaven, she's going to be meeting you there and running to you. And you get to call her Jenna because that's your daughter. That's my daughter. My stepdaughter, I guess, technically. And my sibling, my sons and daughters have a sibling in heaven. Okay? But I do get the decision, and it is a tough decision. And as tough as it is to say, utilize your conscience. The Catholic Church would say that it is wrong to abort a life. It is wrong to end a life before its time. And there is great forgiveness in the Catholic Church for anybody that has been through that. There are organizations that will help, called Rachel's Vineyard is one of them, and it's a great organization that helps women that have been through abortions. And then there's a side organization based off of St. Joseph for the men, because we suffer too. I'm suffering, and I continue to suffer, but I continue to pray for that little soul that's in heaven right now, that she prays for me. So the Catholic Church does forgive and seek it. All right, so I want to see if this video will play. This is a video by an individual named Scott Klusendorf, who gave a talk. Let's see, who gave a talk in Knoxville, out by the airport. He's not Catholic. He is Protestant, but he does have a very good Catholic heart when it comes to understanding what it means to be human. And so you don't have to listen to me talk all the time. I'm going to see if I can get this to play. And where is my volume? Make sure the volume is turned up on this. I don't know. We'll see. See if this plays. Nope, it's not playing. All right, how do I get the sound up to the... How do I get the sound up to here? Yeah, I just want. I'm playing up through there, so. They're on?
Yeah, is there maybe a mute at the bottom?
There is not. And I'm all the way up here.
I do that a lot with my job, but I had a conversation with a guy I'll never
Getting it?
forget.
No?
This guy said to me, what
I have this problem every year. Anybody know how to operate so that sound comes from here to there?
this volume is up at muted and on.
Let's try this again.
Not sure what. Is this the video is shot?
Try escape and then go to your volume bar, wherever it's at, up there.
No, that's a battery. Okay, my volume bar is there, and I'm all the way up here.
Setting up here, so go up here, and then click on, try clicking on that
This?
blue. See if it does your volume. Mirroring.
Mm-hmm. 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 Oh, you know what? Let me do this. I think it might be up here in system settings.
And then sound.
And where's sound? Is it up here?
If you do a search, you can just type in sound. There's a search bar right there.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, here, let me get out of this. Let's do this. Let's do here. Let's do system settings. Battery. Sound.
And then you can choose your output.
Samsung. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. I'm old. All right, let's see if this works now.
From LA to the East Coast, and I do that a lot with my job, but I had a conversation with a guy I'll never forget. This guy said to me, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I do lectures in bioethics, my standard cop-out answer when I, don't really want to engage. And most people don't ask what that is. He said, what's bioethics? I said, well, I do lectures on things like embryo stem cell research, doctor-assisted suicide, and abortion. He said, really? He said, I agree with you. Every woman should have a right to choose. That set me off.
Oh, that's not.
My wife
Oh,
will tell you it is hard for me to walk away from arguments once they start. I said, well, actually, that's not my view. He said, why not? I said, well, it just isn't. I don't hold that view. He said, uh-oh, I know what you're going to tell me. He said, you're Catholic, and your Pope says abortion's wrong, therefore you believe that you can impose your view on me, right? I said, no, I'm not Catholic, although the Pope has written very eloquently on abortion. The Gospel of Life is a beautiful, eloquent defense of the pro-life view, but no, that isn't my position that I was going to argue. He said, okay, you're one of the religious right majority types, whatever you people are, and you're going to impose that because that's your religious view? I said, no. He said, what were you going to tell me? I said, I was going to tell you that I'm pro-life because I believe the pro-life position is true. Men and women, he looked at me like I'd stepped off Mars. He said, true? Really? Yeah, T-R-U-E, true. He said, you really believe that? It's true? Yeah, I do, because there's good evidence for it. Now, I didn't know this, but the guy in front of us had been eavesdropping on the conversation. And he turned around at that point, spread open the chair, stuck his nose through, said, I was listening to what you just said. No kidding. I said, welcome to the conversation. Glad to have you. He said, I couldn't help overhearing what you just said, that you thought there was good reason to believe the pro-life position was true. I was wondering, do you have evidence for that, or was that just an opinion? Wrong question to ask a guy who makes a living defending fetuses as human beings. I said, sure, I'd be happy to defend that view. First of all, though, may I ask you a question? I said, do you believe newborns are human beings? This guy said, no, I believe once it's born, it's a human being. I said, fair enough. Would you then be willing to look with me at the four differences between a fetus that you say is not human and a newborn that you say is? And let's examine those 4 differences and see if any of them are relevant such that we can say it's okay to kill the fetus, but not okay to kill the newborn. He said, you know what, that sounds cool, okay. I said, there's only 4 differences: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And I'm going to say that none of those are relevant. Let's take a look at them. First, size. Would you agree with me that the fetus is smaller than a newborn? He jumped all over that. He said, oh, absolutely. How can you call something the size of a dot a human being? So I asked, are large people more human than small people? Men are generally larger than women. Does that mean men deserve more rights than women? You want to try running that by the flight attendant at 39,000 feet? So we went to the next category. We looked at size, and I told him to think of that acronym SLED, S-L-E-D. Size is your first category. Then we went to L, level of development. I said, would you agree the fetus or embryo is smaller than a newborn? He said, absolutely. He said, how can you call something that doesn't even have a functioning brain yet and is not even self-aware a human being? I said, if self-awareness and intelligence define us as human beings, that means those that are more intelligent should have the right to exploit those of us whose GPA was not too high in high school. It would also mean that we're all on a gigantic bell curve. We start off with very little rights of personhood and very little self-consciousness, and we gradually gain personhood as we reach our intellectual and physical peaks, and then we gradually lose rights of personhood as we age. Is that your view? He says, no, that's an elitist view. I said, well, then why are you imposing it on the fetus? Why? I said, a 4-year-old girl is less developed than a 14-year-old one. That 4-year-old girl does not even have her reproductive system in place yet. Is she less of a person because of it? Well, no, he said. Well, then why would you rule out the fetus from being human simply because its development doesn't match ours? We went to the next category, environment or location. He said, you know, until it's born, it's not a human being. I said, why would you think that? He said, because birth makes it human. I said, how does where you are have any bearing on who you are? A few hours ago, you walked from the terminal at LAX onto this plane. You changed location. Did you stop being you? What about when you rolled over in bed last night? You changed location. Did you stop being you? If not, how does a simple journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly transform a non-human tissue blob into a protectable human life we ought to value and respect? How does it do that? He didn't have an answer for that. We went to the final category, degree of dependency. He said to me, you know, until it's viable, it's not a human. I said, you know, if that's the definition of what makes us human, our ability to live independent of anyone or anything, we've got a problem because there are people on this plane that are not human and we may kill them. How do I know that? Because there are people on this plane who depend on insulin, heart pacemakers, perhaps diabetes medication, and without them, they will not survive. Does that mean they are less human than us? He said, no, I don't like the way that sounds. I said, I don't either. You can see then there's only 4 differences: size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. None of them are morally relevant, are they?
All right. Comments? Makes sense? Is anything missing? Pretty good argument. None of it religious. Spot on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then why is the pro-choice movement so strong?
Because of the wanting to have people be able to choose what is right for them based on themselves. It's a the only way that I can think of it, and you know, you women have a lot more at stake in all this, but it's that pro-choice thing, the ability to choose for themselves what they want for themselves. Yeah.
Just going to say, I think coming from that perspective,
Hmm.
excuse me, if I may, I come from a medical background,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've run into this a lot where I've worked in Catholic hospitals. You know, we've had before St. Mary's closed, I worked there, and we had a few wonderful nuns that were there that would come in, and we would have, you know, other religious leaders in there. And anytime we came upon, you know, something like that, and I don't have any specific patients that went through this,
Right.
but I do personally know a very
Mhm.
which is very, very rare. It's
Yeah.
one of those things, I can't remember the exact statistics, but when we looked up the statistics back then, it was rare, it's rare today.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where, her doctor is very much someone who was not willing to do an abortion. However, in this specific situation, he did look for someone else to help her with that, because for a mother to carry a child that long who was not viable outside, there was no way this child was able to live outside of the womb, period. This child was going to live for 9 months inside inside his or her mother, his or her mother's womb, and then they were gonna go be with the Lord, and we all knew that.
Mhm.
She chose to carry that child, and that was her choice. However, medically speaking, it was very dangerous for her to put her life at risk for that 9 months, and it was her choice to carry that child for 9 months. But not all mothers are strong enough to do that, because within that 9 months that you were supporting a child, there were a lot of things that could have happened to her. Now, whether it was our choice or not, it was not. It was her choice.
Mhm.
We respected it either way. I think at that moment in time, my in that moment in time, I think it goes back to free will.
Mhm.
It goes back to our choice to follow God or not,
Mhm.
in our relationship with God. We weren't able to choose that path, but ultimately it's their choice to choose that.
Right.
Now, personally, that's not me in that. It's just, that's Logan's story, and that's Logan's story to tell. But she was very open as she was going to carry
Mhm.
no matter what.
Yeah.
So that was her testament to her belief in God,
Right.
that he would protect her, but she also knew the medical risk of that, which was a very hard choice for her,
Mhm.
because she said that she struggled with it.
Mhm.
She said that she knew that it was probably better for her to medically to abort, because she had other children before that child
Mhm.
too. And for her to, if something were to happen to her, they would not lose just a sibling, but they would lose their mother.
Right.
And so I think sometimes the more you know, the harder the choices are.
So let me ask you a question. How did that turn out for her? She carried the baby, gave birth, and how is she doing?
I think she had complications afterwards,
Mhm.
but
Due to that?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Because the child didn't have a brain.
Right.
It the child took a breath, and then the child was no longer. Um, and I don't really know. I wasn't there during the
Mhm.
birth. I was actually supposed to be, because I was supposed to be at all high risk
Yeah.
at the hospital, but she didn't give birth
Right.
on shift. Um, but it was very sad, because the child was born and then was no longer.
Yeah.
They were able to lay eyes on the child, and they were able to give them, a full funeral, but it was very much a risk for 9 months. Um,
Yeah, and again, and I don't know what and not all those pregnancies in that situation is the mother at risk, because it's just a natural pregnancy all along, so there may be some other underlying things, but the fact that she wanted to continue, do you know if they baptized the baby when it was born?
their the leader of their church, I can't remember exactly what religion they were in. I know that they were Christian.
Huh?
Came to bless the baby
Good.
at the birth.
Good. Good. And that brings comfort. Yeah, I'd really love to have a conversation, or to know how she is progressing and how differently it would have been for her had she not gone through that. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about stuff like that, where pregnancies that are not, well, we'll talk about things like ectopic pregnancies, which don't count as a pregnancy, because that's just not, that's medically very dangerous. We'll talk about things like the mother having cancer, cervical cancer, and is pregnant. Things like that. What are your options? What does the church say is acceptable and not? But again, her conscience ruled at that point. And it's a very beautiful thing. And I can't help to think that, you know, that woman is on her way to sainthood for just going through that. It's not easy knowing that this is what, but the chance to behold that baby maybe brings more. And again, I'm not, for a father, I would default to go, yeah, man, I know this, the baby's going to die right away, but for the chance for me to hold just for the briefest second that life, and to say goodbye in that manner, I mean, it has some, you know, I don't know. I think that's how I would react. But again, you know, I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough situation. So we'll talk about these things, and there is help, and we'll talk about where you can get help with answers to these questions. I'm in this situation. You know, who can you call? And I'll give you those resources, because it's important to be able to. Sometimes we make decisions in these moments just based on our feelings, and we don't really, which again is okay, but if the more information you have, the more resources you have. And in a long-term pregnancy like that, you have the ability to get answers from your clergy, for us, it's the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they will answer the phone when you call, and if you have a question. So very difficult situations. Deacon Bob Hunt got to baptize a baby that was, I believe the baby was going to die, but it was all hooked up to all kind of machines and open cranial surgery, things like that. And you know, when you baptize, you pour water on them 3 times. Well, you're not going to pour water on that baby, because that would not be good for the baby in that condition. So, consummate thinker, and I don't know why I'm the greater, because this is way greater. He said, and he was a nurse, he said, "Do you have a syringe?" And they said, "Yes." And so he put some holy water in the syringe, and very carefully in a spot, "Is this okay to put a little drop of water here?" And they said, "Yes," 3 times with the syringe. I thought, whoa, that's amazing. That's amazing. And the comfort that it brought to that family, because somebody thought outside the box in the Catholic Church, or even any Christian, that said, let me see, let me try it this way, let me do this. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So anyway, so again, what is human? The answer that we already said based on science is every picture that we looked at is human. And then the other basic question, how do you or how have you defined the unborn? Because that matters in how we define the born. Does how we define the unborn then apply to how we define the born? Yes, of course it does, along with how do we apply our guaranteed rights. Okay, I think I'm going to go a little bit further here before we take a break. So what makes us equal? From the pictures that I showed, physically recognizable as human to those that were not, what do we all have in common? What's the one thing that every single one of us in all those pictures, from the tiniest 2-cell to the person at the end of life, what do we all have in common as humans? We are beloved children of God, created in His image and likeness. It's the likeness that we have a tendency to lose and get back. What kind of nature does a human have? A human nature, right? A dog has a dog nature. A lion has a lion nature. A giraffe has a giraffe nature. A cat has a satanic nature. But, I'm sorry, cat lovers in here? Tell me I'm wrong. I mean, seriously. Tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, we all have human nature. We all have human nature. So how do we treat those determined to have human nature matters? That's why that child in the womb, the 2-celled child in the womb, and I forget, the heart starts to develop at 8 days or something like that? I mean, it's very early. We don't hear the heartbeat maybe for 9, 10 weeks or so. But again, those are just arbitrary, because full human nature is there. At the time the sperm and the egg come together, full nature, human nature is there. It can't be anything else. We're not going to wait 9 months to see if it's a dog, a cat, a giraffe. It's going to be a human. It's going to be a human. So, again, anything other than that is just kind of scientifically random. Scientifically random to make us feel better and to give us an excuse to use our free will to do what we think we should do or want to do. Any further questions on that? Because I'm going to get into some of the crises that we have today in society. Some deep crises. But any other comments? Any other questions? You can always go ahead.
So, IVF is wrong. Is it considered wrong because the egg is fertilized and you're pulling another egg?
Because typically you don't just fertilize one. You're looking for the greatest chance of survival. So you are, and it's not to say that in the future that the Catholic Church may find a way to accept this, but there's two reasons. One, it treats the child as a commodity, absent of the marital act between a man and a woman. And we have seen in people that have found out, and not everyone, but people that have found out that they were created in that manner, and there's just something missing. They will all tell you that there's just something missing from their life, and it's that bond between a man and a woman to create that child that we're looking at, and that's the Catholic reason. So it's. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Again, that's where your conscience comes in. But what the Catholic Church is concerned with is those others that didn't make it, knowing, and the doctors know full well that there are some that are not going to make it. You have siblings in heaven, because the minute that comes together, they are created by God and infused with a soul by God. We believe at the moment of conception that we're infused with a soul. And so, again, tough decisions, tough stuff, but you are no less a human. I could put you beside anybody else in here, and any other child that was created out of rape, any other child that was created out of incest, and say, tell me which one belongs in each of those categories. You can't do it. You can't do it. Unless you know something, you can't do it. And that's why you're treated with respect and dignity, because you have that full human nature, and you were created and infused with a soul as a child of God. So, yeah, very good. Thank you for that story. Anybody else? Yep.
Is the Catholic Church convincing people of their point of view, or are we not? Are we winning this battle or not? And that, just from the guy to diner point of view, I think we're losing. I think, it is so prevalent and so strong, and even in that exchange
Mm-hmm.
that we heard, the guy said, "Well, are you wacko Catholics? I mean, whatever we're doing."
Okay. There's two other comments that their hands went up at the same time you started talking. So you first.
So I'd like to say on the younger people's behalf, I think that the Catholic Church's view is starting to win, if that helps you all.
I think right now it's more about like including everybody and accepting everybody amongst the younger generation. We're trying to just accept us all so that we can get up to get to church. That's like the biggest
Hmm.
thing right now. It's the hardest step for us, but the Tower Church most definitely, I think that perspective is taking over more. It's just about having empathy for those people who are pro-choice still and giving them the same love as the same thing. I think it's more so, not to throw shade at the older generation, but I think it's the older generations that are a little bit more stuck in what they believe and are a little bit less open-minded to accepting some other things. Um, but I think the younger generation very much is trying to accept the Catholic faith.
Kevin. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, us older people are working, so we don't have we don't have time for that marching and protesting and doing whatever stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing it in here. You're seeing every year upon year, and in my church, year upon year, we're seeing more and more young people coming in because they want to know the truth, and they're tired of society telling them what the truth is because that keeps changing. And we're going, okay, I want to know what the truth is, and what is the truth? Anybody? What is the truth? I'll get to you in a second. What is the truth? Pilate asked that question. What is truth? What is truth? It's Jesus. It's a person. It's not a thing. It's Jesus is the truth. So tell me about that. Yeah, what yeah. Oh yeah. So in case you couldn't hear, she's talking about education, and education is important. And when we know stuff, our conscience get better formed, and we start to realize what's really happening. And it question, we should at least start to question those things, and that's the big thing: is to just question, is to just question. So one of the things, yes, is the Catholic Church winning or losing. Alls I know is that what Jesus prayed for at the Last Supper in John's Gospel, chapter 18 of John's Gospel, is he prayed for unity, Father, that we all be one. We have the conversion of St. Paul coming up next week, and St. Paul is a staunch supporter of unity. That we're not here to follow Apollos or Peter or Paul. We are here to follow Christ, and that's the bottom line. By the end of time, will we all be united as one? Probably not, but at least that's the prayer. And Jesus didn't. Every prayer that Jesus asked to the Father was answered by the Father. So, in reality, yeah, maybe it will all get to that point because Jesus doesn't waste his prayers to the Father. All right, let's take a break. How long do you take a break for? 10 minutes? Okay, that's fine. That works. All right, I'm recording all your conversations right now. So, yes. Everybody say Jesus. Yes. We used to joke about that in class when we didn't know the answer to a question. We just say Jesus. He's the answer. And it wasn't quite what our instructor was going for at the time, but that's what it was. So okay. So some of the crises that we have today. And I probably need to develop these slides a little bit better. But here's some of the crises that we have today, and the really big one is pornography, right? Human trafficking, abortion, euthanasia, hunger, homelessness, and that last one we'll cover in a bit, despair. But you look at pornography and human trafficking in particular, it's that culture that has us using other people for our own benefit. And, the question becomes, what, so what? I mean, they're putting themselves out there on the internet. Why can't I? Well, because you're treating another human being as less than a human being. You're treating them as a commodity, even though you don't see them. I'm telling you, pornography is tough. Once you get into it, it is tough to get out. It's one of the addictions that we don't really think of as being, we think of alcoholism as being a huge addiction that's tough. We have 12-step programs for that. But and people are with access to the internet, younger and younger kids are stumbling onto it on the internet. If you have kids, I beg you, do not allow computers and televisions in non-public areas. Their phones at night, stay in the kitchen. And you do the same thing. You, as an example, do not put electronic media in a place where others can't see you use it. Because the temptation is there, and you will innocently type something into a search bar, and something that you did not intend come up. And like I said, it's like that key to the door that God says don't go into. Our natural curiosity is go, well, let me see what's here. And then the next thing you know, you've gone down a rabbit hole that you can't get back out of. So I beg you, at least start there with your own devices. I don't sleep with my phone next to me in bed. When I do, I get in trouble. You wake up in the middle of the night, the first tendency you have is to get on that phone, even if it's just scrolling the news or scrolling for whatever. Social media, biggest platforms for pornography. Two of the biggest are X, formerly called Twitter, and Reddit. Huge. If you've got kids that have Twitter accounts or X accounts, you have to monitor that. And it's so easy because they're way smarter than us old people, whatever age that happens to be. I'm 1 year away from being able to park in the 65 and over slot. I'm kind of excited about that. I can receive a lot of benefits for... I know, see? I kind of almost feel guilty because I can still get around better than my wife at 57. So we have this running joke that we built a house. I see a squirrel, I chase it. That's just what I do. We built a house. We built our forever house, if you will. It's all handicapped accessible, wheelchair accessible, wide door frames. The showers are all roll in, roll out. Because I told her, I said, I'm 7 years older than you. It won't be long before I'm pushing you around in a wheelchair. And she said, I'll be pushing you before you push me. And she just had 2 knee replacements and said she lost that bet. So, whatever. But where was I? What was I talking about? I was talking about social media accounts and things like that. Our kids have the ability to get around even whatever block we put on there. If you got an iPhone, it's even more difficult because iPhone doesn't track apps and what shows up on apps. with regards to programs like Covenant Eyes, which is a great program for keeping yourself and your accountability informed of what you're looking at. But yeah, they're going to get around it. Facebook. You can type certain things on Facebook, and it'll take you, I think they're called Reels. Is that right? Reels? It's a video to me. Reels. And some of these Reels would look innocent to start, have embedded into them pornography. It's like, it's everywhere. How do you get away from it? But it's all part of the use culture, and that's the idea, is that we have to get out of that culture of using people for our pleasure. Human trafficking is the same thing. If you're looking at pornography, you're supporting human trafficking. One of the biggest, probably, I think is maybe like 70% to 30% human work trafficking is that much higher than sex trafficking, and that's even harder to see. These women aren't on there, or men in some cases, aren't on there for, oh, this is great, making money, I love this, whatever. Deep down it goes against their nature, and we're going to talk a little bit about the prophetic vocation of women, and how that just completely blows that out of the water. But even women, the statistics now are that a huge percentage of those addicted to pornography are women. Sad. We talked about abortion, euthanasia. We had a little side discussion on that, and we probably go more into euthanasia. That's I'm growing flowers or something. We can go more into that, but what particularly as you medical workers, what are you obliged to do, and what don't you have to do if you're asked to do something? You just go, and this just doesn't seem right. But we respect life, as I said, from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death. And how do we allow natural death to come on? What's the difference between that and slowly killing somebody with morphine, upping the morphine? Yeah.
Thinking on that, with patients who withdraw care and are very close to passing,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, yes, there's more of a gray area depending on
Mm-hmm.
the patient situation you have. However, looking at it from a professional manner,
Sure.
if I have a patient who looks truly miserable, they're breathing, they look like in pain,
Yeah.
I'm going to treat their pain.
Yes.
As a Catholic, we treat people with dignity.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's that treating
Yeah.
people with dignity?
Yeah. Just enough. Well, yeah, I mean, there is a difference, and only you can know what that difference is. That I'm just going to increase this just to speed things up, as opposed to, because the dying process can be very beautiful. It can be very beautiful. I do one thing when I enter a patient's room that's dying. I take off my shoes. Why would I do that? Anybody? Who took off the? Go ahead. Moses in the burning bush. Moses took off his shoes because he was approaching God. You will never be closer to somebody that is that close to seeing Jesus than you are when you're in the room of a dying person that is suffering well. Anybody familiar with Colossians 1 verse 24? I make up in myself what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ. That's a stumbling block to most Protestants. But what is lacking? What possibly could be lacking? And they'll have a crucifix in here, but what possibly could be, is it, oh, there it is. What could possibly be lacking in that? I know you know the answer. What is it, Kevin? It's our participation in it. Christ didn't die on the cross so that we didn't have to suffer. He died to show us that it can be redemptive. Most of the time when we're pushing pills and pushing morphine and pushing painkillers, we're providing more comfort to the family member than we are to the person that's laying there dying. But I get it. Follow your conscience, right? Follow your conscience. But I'm just telling you that there are two things that the Catholic Church says that we must give. We must give if it is all possible for them to accept. And what are those two things? Anybody? What are the two things we need to live? Two primary things we need to live. Food and water. If you can take food and water, then you take food and water. What about a PNG tube? The guy that I was sitting with had a PNG tube. He had an NG tube. And that's how he was fed. And after a while, he couldn't take that. Then after a while, he couldn't take water. It was ice chips. And it was just beautiful to be there and to accompany him through that dying process with his wife right there. So, yeah, there's a guide for you people that are in the medical industry, and I think I may have it, at least the connection in here somewhere. Hunger is a crisis, homelessness is a crisis, but the number one, and it's in capitals, is despair. It's the number two killer of individuals between the ages of 10 and 14. It's despair. It's pretty high on the list for those on the list for those up to 35 years of age. And what is despair but a lack of hope? Despair is a lack of hope when we don't have hope. And what is our hope? What is our hope as Christians? Our salvation. That's our hope, that all of this is short and just temporary, that if we can just live this life in accordance with what Jesus wanted us to do, and Deacon David says it's not what would Jesus do, it's what did Jesus do. But if we can just live accordance with that, then we have our salvation to look forward to. Despair comes about when you have nothing to look forward to, when the situation seems so grave. I ask people that are in despair, that are suffering, I said, will you please pray for me? Because you're suffering. And the fact that you're suffering means something. And I need your prayers because you're suffering. You are close to Jesus. Okay? Difficult stuff. Any comments on despair? Yeah. Talk loudly, please. I'll repeat your question. Go ahead. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it highly depends on the situation, and it's very, very specific, and that's why I would refer you. And I'm not being a cop-out here, but I can't make a here, another dad joke. My wife asked me if I liked the quilt or the comforter better, and I said I'm not ready to make a blanket statement. So I'm not ready to make a blanket statement because there is nothing that fits every single category. And I will refer you to a resource on the diocese website. I will actually take you there that talks about end-of-life issues and how you handle those end-of-life issues. The answer is maybe. Right? Maybe. So, all right. So what's wrong? We have a distorted relationship between men and women. There's sin, there's use, abuse, exploitation, both being exploited and allowing yourself to be exploited. Women, please do not allow yourself to be exploited. Men, please do not allow yourself to be exploited. And because the problem goes both ways, do not exploit another individual for your own good. It's the definition of love. We'll get to this, but what's the definition of love? Anybody? It's willing the good of the other as other. It has nothing to do with me. That's Thomas Aquinas again. It's willing the good of the other as the other. And willing the good is knowing what is good for that other person. And it's not just accepting, oh, well, you're you and I'm me and whatever you want to do is fine with you. That is not in the best interest of that other person. And sometimes that's tough, but that's what love is. Love is not a two-way street. Love is a one-way street. It's nice if we get a response back, and we should. When somebody shows love to us, we should respond, but it's not required. Marriage is not a two-way street. Marriage is not 50-50. It's 100-100. And we all can't give 100% every time, but we give our best. And so it's not, I did half the chores, you got to do the other half of the chores thing. We should. You know, we should be able to read your minds. I should be able to read my wife's minds. No, absolutely not. We're not wired like that, women. You want something, you tell us what you want, and you tell us 50 times, and then maybe we'll do it. But seriously, we are different. We could not be more different than each other and still be equal. We cannot be more different than each other. You cannot look at two people, a man and a woman, and go, wow, they are so different, but they are exactly the same. They are equal. They are equal. And our model is the Trinity, 3 distinct persons in one God. It's the one thing we can say about God, is that he is 3. Mind-blowing, but the same. We can't be more different and yet be equal. Let me ask you a question. Who here has a muscular system? Who here has a nervous system? Who here has a skeletal system? Who here has a reproductive system? You're lying. You have half a reproductive system. You have half a reproductive system. Man and woman don't make sense without 2 separate reproductive systems. Okay? Makes sense? You have individual reproductive systems that are not complete without the other. It is not complete. That is part of what an adequate anthropology means. That's what it means, partly. When we eclipse the Creator, the creature disappears. If God was all of a sudden decide he doesn't love you anymore, you cease to exist. Just like that. Because you die does not mean God doesn't love you. It means he's got something better for you. That's the difference. God does not put a period on the end of our lives on earth. He puts a comma. And if you're St. Paul, he doesn't put anything, because St. Paul has never met a punctuation mark that he likes. You ever read St. Paul and it's just like one big long sentence that just keeps going and going and going? Yeah, as a lector you can say yes, absolutely. And that's part of how you know whether it was St. Paul or somebody else. But yeah, God doesn't put a period on our lives. God is the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they are alive in heaven. And the people that we know are alive in heaven, the people that have gone before us. Whether that's been through a miscarriage, an abortion, in vitro, through whatever, they are alive. They are alive, and we can ask them to pray for us. All right, so Genesis is a big, it's a big part of all this, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but to get to the prophetic vocation of women, how many stories of creation are there in the Bible? Two. There's 2. So that would be in chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis, maybe? Makes sense? In the beginning? Which came first, Genesis 2 or Genesis 1? Which was written first? Simple answer, right? Genesis 2. Genesis 2 was written before Genesis 1, probably by 500 years or so. So we have these 2 different stories of creation. You've had scripture from Joe Abamuso. You probably may have heard the term historical prose fiction, which covers at least the first 11 chapters of the Bible. It's kind of along the lines of a fable. It's meant to tell a story using imagery. Is there a first man and a woman? Yes, there's a first man and a woman. So each society had those, but not going deeply into that. But God made creation. He made all of us. He made the stars. There's this throwaway line in Genesis, Genesis 1, I think it may be 13, where Genesis said, God made the stars. It says, by the way, he made the stars. If you were to take every single star just in the Milky Way galaxy, and you were to turn them into a grain of sand, do you know how much area that would cover? Any idea? You'd create a pile that was 5 miles long, 5 miles wide, and 5 miles deep if every grain of sand represented a star. And in the galaxy, which is 19 billion light years across, you're talking about 35 miles plus 35 miles times 35 miles. That's huge. And oh, by the way, he also made you. Okay, so how important are you? How much do you matter? God said when he created all these things that it was good. What did he say when he created man? It was very good. Very good. And then he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And I know that's true for me. It's not good for me to be alone. I don't know what would happen to me if I was always by myself. It'd just be disastrous. So he made woman. And why did he make woman? Why did he make woman? And this is where the prophetic vocation of women comes. God sends prophets when something is not right. He doesn't send prophets when everything is good. He didn't send John the Baptist because everything was really cool. He didn't send Isaiah. You look at all the prophets in the Old Testament all the way up to John the Baptist. He sent them when there was trouble. And there was trouble in paradise. Man was alone, and it wasn't going to be good because all he had was animals, and none of them were compatible with him. And then God made woman. And I think this is the first sin. What did Adam say? Finally, somebody that's flesh of my flesh and blood of my... He didn't say thank you. I mean, I would have been going, thank you. I had all these stinky animals around me. Now I got this beautiful human being right here. And it's not that she completes me. It's that together we are one. Woman's prophetic vocation is, and Eve taught Adam how to do one thing primarily, and that's how to love. And that is your prophetic vocation as women, is to teach us guys how to properly love. Whatever that looks like, that's your job, is to teach us how to love, because we don't know how to do it, and we mess up a lot. And so don't try to be like a guy. You're not good at it. I'm not going to try to be like a woman because I stink at it. So together, we can be one, and we can, again, like I said, be so much different, but yet still be one, and that's Trinity, because we have the ability to create another individual. And we become like God in that we have the ability, not that we do, it's not cut out for everybody, but that ability is there to be able to create like God created and form that other Trinity, man, woman, and baby, man, woman, and child. Okay? God loves you and gave you a woman. We are made to love. That's the Father. We are made to be loved. The beloved is the Son. And we are made to exude love. That's the love that goes between the Father and the Son. And between a husband and a wife, that love becomes so great it creates another. It creates a third. Okay? So that's an adequate anthropology, and that's a kind of brief history of human dignity. It all comes down to love and relationship. Is what we are doing, is that proper in the sense of love? Are we loving the way that we should love? Are we loving in the way the Creator has loved us? Okay. Any comments on that part of the talk? Very good. Now I want to get into making decisions. How do we make decisions as Catholics in this life? Just going to give you some examples. I'll use Aquinas again also. First of all, you have to have a well-formed conscience. We talked about that. You have to use your conscience, but you have to constantly form your conscience. And that comes through knowledge and wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and wisdom. Wisdom is the only virtue, by the way, and Aquinas would say this, the only virtue that we can perfectly attain here on earth. Every other virtue we have to wait. We can have perfect wisdom of the things we know and understand. We just can't know and understand everything there is. Every act that we make, we can have perfect wisdom about that act, but we can't possibly know the effect generation to generation to generation. I stopped to help somebody change their tire. What did that set in motion? If I didn't stop to help that person change their tire, and be careful doing that. It's just an example. There's a lot of crazies out there. But if we didn't do that, what didn't take place? The fact that you're sitting in this room Do you realize that somewhere in history, thousands of years ago, if two people didn't get together at the right time, that you may not be here as you are? That's how important every single decision we have. And we'll get to find that out at the end of the world. I think somebody else is talking about the 3 last things, or the 4 last things. Right? Who is? I think it is. But yeah, at the final judgment, we'll all have a particular judgment, heaven or hell. But there will be a general judgment where we'll get to see. I mean, that's probably why, it's going to be one of the greatest things about heaven, that we'll get to see our effect going forward for every act that we did, and people coming up and thank you for doing this. Thank you. You did this back in 2026, and this is what happened because you did that. And then you'll get to meet the people that had the effect of even bringing you here. So making decisions, what we do, is important, but we have to have a well-formed conscience. So don't make decisions on a whim the Catholic Church gives you. It's better to understand what to do before the situation comes up. My mother-in-law was in a suffering situation before she died, and my wife says, what does the Catholic Church teach about her specific situation? And I told her, and it brought great comfort to my wife because she knew she was doing the thing that the Catholic Church said is the best thing to do in that situation, even though she could have just decided, no, my feelings are telling me this, and that's fine. What did Jesus do? The loving thing, but how do we determine what the loving thing is? We have the magisterium, which you know about as the teaching authority of the church. There's 2,000 years of, like I said before, 2,000 years of decision making. The church does not just make a decision on a whim, because why? The church doesn't want to get it wrong and have to go back and change. That's why it takes so long for the church to decide on something that we think, because you need to get in with the times. This is the 21st century. The church needs to come into the 21st century. Well, the minute it does, it ceases to be the church. It's like Mozart and his music. You change a note, you change Mozart. We don't want to change. We want to make sure that when we define something, it is emphatically defined and it is the truth. Because you don't want to go. Part of the reason you're here is because, you're tired of society telling you this is the way to do it, and it's not. Okay. All right. Anybody heard of the double effect? Thomas Aquinas' double effect. I'm going to real quickly go through an example. Anybody heard of the train track problem? Raise your hand if you heard of the train track problem. Okay. All right. We'll get to the train track problem, but the double effect is determining if an action with 2 significant effects is ethically right. There may be 2 really good things, but which is the right one to choose? There's some characteristics of this. 1, the act itself is good and not evil. It's not going to run over the kid or the person or whoever's lying on the track. One of my favorite TV shows was it the Canadian Mountie, Dudley Do Right? Yeah. I'm aging myself there, but anyway, had to save what's her name on the train track. But yeah, that's the thing. You're going to throw the switch, right? All right. Let me take it in a different direction. Let's say we have 1 person lying on one track and 5 people lying on the other track. The train's coming down. You can't stop the train. The train can't stop. You've got to change the track. What are you going to do? You're going to go after the 1 person, you're going to go after the 5. Do you intend for anybody to get killed? No, you don't. But you have to make a decision. Most of us are going to switch it to the single person on that track. Now, let's throw in another wrench. The person on that track is your son. And there's 5 people that you don't know on the other track. Now what are you going to do? The church is telling you that you're okay to make either decision. You don't intend for anybody to get killed. You don't intend that. You don't intend the evil. The act of throwing the switch is not an evil act. It's something you have to do. So again, all right, let's look at it as a specific case. I've got a pregnant woman here with cancer of the uterus. Okay? Pregnant woman with cancer of the uterus. The woman has a choice. She can take chemo and heal her cancer, most likely, but there's a chance that the fetus will not survive the chemo. What do? Do you refuse the chemo, allow the child to live, or do you take the chemo and risk the chance of the child dying? Anybody got a thought? Not take the chemo is what you would do. Okay. Very, very acceptable. Anybody decide that they're going to take chemo? What factors might come into that decision? Good. Okay. 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 All right. Very good. You run the risk, though, of dying before that happens, but yeah, okay. I mean, it's a decision. It's good. How about if you had 5 kids at home, and we've talked about this before, and this is the 6th child, and there's nobody to take care of the child? Is it okay to take the chemo? Sure. It's always okay to save your own life. Always. It's a tough decision. Is it okay to remove the baby? Tough one. No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because almost every single incident, and there may be instances where a doctor would say, yes, you must remove the baby because the baby will kill you. But that has got to be extremely, extremely rare in the medical field. You know, and I'm not talking about ectopic pregnancies. What we do in ectopic pregnancy is we cut out that piece of the fallopian tube and then allow the baby to die naturally. It's not an abortion in the Catholic Church, even though we know that's going to be the outcome. We know that's going to be happening, but we're treating that fetus with dignity to allow the fetus to die on their own. It may seem cruel, but they're going to die anyway. Why not just chemically kill them? But the Catholic Church would say, no, we need to treat that with dignity.
So I actually have a blood disorder, and I've been told that any type of pregnancy would more than likely end up taking my life.
Yeah.
What would that?
If you got pregnant, well, you got a decision to make with the doctors and the church, and you talk to them and go, this is where we're at. Medical technology, may change, and say we now have a way to treat that and to keep that from happening. It's going to be extremely expensive. So that even plays into the whole thing. It's why we don't require people to have medical intervention to save their lives, because it may not be financially possible, but we don't kill them. We don't kill them. We help them with the pain, and we allow them to die naturally. Anyway, just a lot of things to consider, and I tell you that they're not easy decisions. You have a catechism in front of you. We don't have a lot of time here, but you don't have a catechism necessarily in front of you. But all these issues fall under particular sections in the catechism, and so you can write that down. We talked about freedom. Man's freedom starts in Article 3 of Part 3 of the Catechism, where you can look up man's freedom. What's it mean to be free? You can look up what it means to have a moral conscience. That's Article 6, like we mentioned, of Part 3. That's in there. You can read more about that, get some answers there. And then all the stuff on end-of-life issues starts in Article 5, the 5th commandment, do not kill. The abortion issues are in here. All of that is in here, and you can go look at that. But let me get to a respect for the dead. Can't distribute your ashes over the Smoky Mountains. Just can't do that. We have to treat that. You can bury at sea, but it has to be in a container that is going to sink and not disperse. So anyway, all right. So one of the things I want to do is, if you can write this down, dionox.org, dioknox.org is the website for the diocese. And a lot of these issues are in a crazy place because Paul Simoneau is a crazy former Marine, and sometimes he just does crazy things. The guy's awesome, by the way. So let's see. I think I can pull this up here. Let's go here. Okay, so this is not mirroring the website, which is just really, I don't have time to fix it. That's okay. So if you go to the Dionox website and look under ministries, you'll find something called the Ministry of Justice and Peace, I believe. Yeah, no. Where is that? There's actually right up top is a Catholic bioethics, and it talks about beginning of life and end of life decisions. For the people that are nurses or medical field, guide for healthcare workers is what you want to look up, and you can go to the EWTN website, EWTN.com, and look for guide for healthcare workers. But under the bioethics session, there's beginning of life issues, end of life decisions, and care, which will tell you the decisions, what you should make, what you shouldn't make decision wise. It's got a lot of forms and documents there. I used to print all that out, but it's so available to you on the website. But you start to browse through that, and you'll get to see some of these resources. And the biggest one is the National Catholic Bioethics Center. They have a hotline that you can call, and they will answer the phone. I know people that have called it in a situation where it was pretty dire. So anyway, that's what I got. I think I got 2 minutes time to pray. Well, any quick questions, by the way? Again, couldn't cover everything. There's a lot, but I want to make you think, and then just, always ask the question, why? What do I do? And the Catholic Church will give you the what. It's hard to answer the why. They will give you advice on what to do. But again, always follow your conscience, form your conscience well. Okay? Thank you, guys. Let's pray. Going out. What am I going to do? What am I going to do for a prayer? I like scripture for prayer. It's kind of neat. I think this is appropriate because I like deacons. I'm a deacon myself. And Saint Ephrem. Anybody heard of Saint Ephrem? Anybody taken on the name Ephrem for their confirmation saint? No. Anybody got a really weird confirmation saint name? Hildegard? Yeah, Saint Hildegard. Doctor of the church, right? Yeah, she's one of the 4 women doctors of the church, I believe. So, I think her daughter's feast day is today, maybe. Anyway, all right. So, prayer of Saint Ephrem. Name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. O Master, O Lord and Master of my life, take from me the spirit of sloth, despair, lust of power, and idle talk, but give rather the spirit of chastity, humility, patience, and love of thy servant. Yea, O Lord and King, grant me to see my own transgressions and not to judge my brother. For blessed art thou unto ages of ages. Amen. O God, be merciful to me, a sinner. O God, cleanse me of my sins and have mercy on me. I have sinned countless times. Forgive me, O Lord. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, guys. Quick announcement.